How's it going, Chargers fans? Welcome back to another weekly injury update with Jamieson. Thankfully, my services were not required last week, given a relatively clean injury report. Not common of the Chargers, but we're thankful for it. Nonetheless, this week there is unfortunately a little bit more to discuss. So, without further ado, let's talk about the topics that we're going to get into this week. This is Packers week, week 11. We're going to talk a little bit about Keenan Allen's AC joint sprain and why there is perhaps a little bump on the right hand side of his shoulder that he currently has, and why the left injury may result in the same. So we'll talk a little bit about that and AC joint injuries in general. We'll talk about Josh Palmer. I didn't get too much of a chance to talk about this initially. When this happened, I did not know he was going on IR. He has since been on IR for the past 2 weeks. We'll talk about when we can potentially see him return in that optimistic window, and a little bit about what injury he suffered in his knee with as much information as we know. I do also want to talk quickly about Corey Linsley in that group. We don't have any further information about his heart condition or what it is, but I do want to talk about very briefly heart conditions in the NFL, particularly atrial fibrillation. Again, I do not know that is for sure what Corey Linsley has, but it is something that is very common in NFL athletes and could potentially be a non-threatening or non-emergent heart issue that would keep him out for this long. So we'll talk about that and kind of what potentially we could see him for the rest of the season. And then lastly, we'll jump into the injury report kind of more broadly, talk about a few Charger players and also any Packers players that might miss the game this upcoming week. So Keenan Allen, unreal game this past week, unreal season so far, and kind of a storied career, just passing 10,000 yards for his career as well. So I don't want to talk too much about the Detroit game as well. It's been beat to death on the channel. Stephen and Tyler and Alex and everyone else has talked about it. So let's talk about this man and his storied career and this initial AC joint separation, which happened in, I believe, 2013. Now, the AC joint is a joint between the collarbone or a clavicle, as it's known, and the acromion, which is a little piece of bone on your scapula or your shoulder blade in the back of your shoulder. That blade or that kind of joint there, the AC joint, helps stability in the shoulder. And there's a lot of ligaments that kind of hold those two bones together. Those can be disrupted when a player is hit, when a quarterback is hit in the act of throwing, when a linebacker is making contact as well. All that types of blunt force trauma can cause separation of those ligaments, and that can be various degrees of severity. Very rarely is it's something that's like emergent or operative that a player needs to get taken to the OR. And in the NFL in general, it's not an injury that keeps players out for that long. I think the average time miss is about 7 days. For Keenan, I'm expected and optimistic about him coming back and playing. He knows what this is like. This is actually his left AC joint that he suffered this injury on. The right side, which has that noticeable bump you can see in both photos there, is something that happens after these injuries. When you have the disruption of those ligaments and those bones move continuously, you get a little bit of fluid and also kind of other buildup over that joint. It doesn't normally affect mobility. As you can see for Keenan's 10 years career since he's had this, it doesn't seem to bother him. And it's, at the end of the day, cosmetic. It's something that can be, handled, when in retirement or something like that. It's possible that he gets something similar depending on the severity of that left AC joint sprain on the other side, something to match, but we'll have to see. But I don't expect him to miss any time with this, hopefully. And if anything, it's going to be 1 week at the max and likely not more after that. Now, I do want to talk about Josh Palmer. So he was initially thought to have this knee injury. There was not a lot of information about what it exactly was. We still don't know much about exactly what it was, other than it's a knee sprain, which is not particularly helpful. So it was aggravated in that Bears game. He was placed on IR right before the week 9 game, I believe, against the Jets. And so he's now missed 2 games. He's going to have to miss 2 more. But the question then becomes, will he be able to come back right away? So he's eligible for return against the Patriots on December 3rd. But it's all dependent on this knee sprain. Now, you have the 4 main ligaments of the knee. We've talked about this before. You got one on either side, one on the medial side or the inside of your knee, one on the lateral side of your knee. Those are the medial collateral ligament and the lateral collateral ligament. And then you have the ones that we are most scared about, particularly the ACL, the anterior cruciate ligament, and the PCL, the posterior cruciate ligament. Now we don't know which one is sprain. A sprain just means that one of those ligaments was partially torn or stretched or injured in some way. It's likely not the ACL. In fact, if it was, we would have heard something about that by now, like Mike Williams unfortunately suffered before, which makes it, us think about the rest of the ligaments in the knee. The most commonly injured one is the MCL. It's something that happened quite a bit last season, although we haven't seen it much this season in players. Trey Pipkins had this. I believe Joshua Kelly had an MCL sprain that required a trip to IR as well. But I don't know that that's for sure what he suffered, Josh Palmer. But I think that's probably the most likely knee sprain that we're talking about here. And recovery for that is about usually 4 to 6 weeks, hence the IR. He gutted through that performance and tried to play through it. He initially went down, and it looked bad. It looked like this, and I was scared that it was a more serious knee injury, that he aggravated something. He was able to return to the game. So I'm optimistic that after these 4 weeks of rest, he'll be able to come back pretty close to that first week of eligibility against the Patriots on December 3rd. So we'll see if we get any more information about whether it was the MCL or not, but look for him to start practicing ahead of that Patriots week. And if they open that practice window early, I think it's optimistic we see him come back, hopefully with more rest and lower risk in the future of aggravating that MCL injury going forward. And I do want to take a little bit of time here. I didn't make a slide for it, but to talk about Corey Linsley, obviously a cornerstone piece of that offensive line has been missing for almost, I think, 6 or 7 weeks now. And we still don't know any more information about what that heart condition is called. We got some comments from Vernon Staley just talking about his new role in the team, how he's being a leader behind the scenes and being kind of an educator and just staying involved with the team and being optimistic about his status. We don't know any more about when he can potentially return. He's eligible to return off the PUP list whenever he's fit to play. I think there's a couple conditions that this could possibly be. There is some data that shows that the rate of atrial fibrillation is about 6 times higher in NFL players. That's very high. Atrial fibrillation is a type of arrhythmia in the heart. It's dangerous because it can potentially lead to clot formation. And when your heart's not beating properly, the blood's not flowing through the heart properly, you get areas of that blood that tends to kind of eddy in a pool. And if you've been around a river, there's parts of the river that don't flow really well. And that area can in blood will start to clot. That can cause a whole lot of issues that are life threatening. So it's important for these players to seek treatment. There was another Jacksonville Jaguars lineman earlier this season. I believe the name of Tyler Shelty that was diagnosed with AFib in the beginning of the season, was placed on blood thinners and was able to return and is playing with the Jacksonville Jaguars right now. So if that's the case, it could be something that Corey Linsley is exploring and treating. But again, this is all speculative. We'll see when he comes back, if he comes back this season. It's just really hard to put a time point on that. So I know he's getting really good treatment. I know he's working with the Chargers medical staff. I hope we see him again at some point this season when it's safe to see him back on the field. But I just wanted to provide a little bit more context about my thoughts behind that and when we can potentially see that starting center return to the lineup. And then lastly, let's just jump into the injury report for the week. So for the Chargers, we've already talked about Keenan Allen. Jalen Guyton was a late addition to the injury report. We don't like to see those, especially when it's a soft tissue injury like a groin. Apparently, Brandon Staley said it was a minor injury, just something that he picked up. I don't think there's any serious concern that he misses the game, but it's still something, that can be aggravated during competition level play. So something to keep an eye on, especially with Keenan Allen having an injury, with missing Josh Palmer. The wide receiver room is looking thinner than we would like. So it's something to keep an eye on. Isaiah Spiller, also a late addition with an illness as well. Michael Davis had a really bad illness that forced him out of the game last week against Detroit. Again, no one likes being sick and playing like that as well. So not a huge piece of the offense, fortunately, but something to keep in mind. And JT Woods is still on the PUP list, although good to see him returning to practice. We still don't really know what forced him out of that list initially. But it's good to see that he's at least moving, and his 21-day window has been activated. So we'll hopefully see him return to the lineup in the next 1 to 2 weeks. On the Packers side, again, rather larger list, but no one really in danger of missing, except for their safety, Rudy Ford. Most of these other players, including Jairus Jay Alexander and Quay Walker are expected to play full complements of snaps. Just a lot of load management on their side as well. And that's all I have for you guys. So, been a tough break last week. I mean, it was good to see the offense really kicking into gear, and hopefully we can have a more complete performance against the Packers this week. Hopefully the injury report remains small. We get some of our players back, Gerald Everett as well, having questionable chest injury. We'll see how that evolves. He didn't practice at all this week, which is not optimistic about a quick return to the lineup. But again, we'll see. And hopefully we get the Chargers rolling back to 5-5 and onward. Hopefully with them able to string together a couple wins here. But as always, guys, it's a pleasure. If you have any further questions or anything that comes up, feel free to tweet at me or X at me, whatever it is these days, at Chargers Medical. I'm always available to answer questions and happy to do so. But until next week, guys, Bolts up.